Hey YouTube, and welcome to the very first episode of Virtual History Tours. This channel is going to find interesting historical sites using old maps and Google Earth technology to take a look at what they look like today. And the first episode is going to be focused on Lake Maspenock, which is also known as North Pond, and it's located in the towns of Hopkinton, Milford and Upton, Massachusetts. You may know Hopkinton as the starting line for the Boston Marathon. Boston sits about 25 miles east of Hopkinton. So the area that we're going to look at today is the south end of the lake. The early settlers came upon this area, and they would have come upon a very small pond, about 56 acres compared to the 215 acres it is today. An 1831 map of Hopkinton superimposed will show you that. So we can see the pond was really small back then. There was a few cart roads running in. We're going to do some future episodes on those. So the area that we're talking about here is the south end of the lake, and this is where the first settlers and mills were located, probably around 1730s or so. Is when these first roads were laid out, and the mills and so forth were put in. So let's take a look at an 1827 map of Milford that I took a picture of down at the Milford Historical Society. And we're going to take a look at these mills here, a woolen factory and sawmill run by the Hunt brothers, E.B. Hunt and Lowell Hunt. And the Hunt brothers are sons of a man who is named Daniel Hunt. Sorry about that. And Daniel Hunt was a non-resident of Upton in 1798. This map is from 1798, was prepared for the Upton Historical Society. So we can see Daniel Hunt here owned this land, but was not residing on it in 1798. But in 1827, we see the Hunt sons with a woolen factory. So this area here, the first settlers called it Bungay, and Aidan Ballew's History of Milford references Bungay on several passages in that book. And I looked that up on Wikipedia, and it says the origin of the name Bungay is thought to derive from the Anglo-Saxon title Bunnacha Hay, signifying the land belonging to the tribe of Bonna, a Saxon chieftain. Due to its high position, protected by the River Waveney and marshes, the site was in a good defensive position and attracted settlers from early times. So that's kind of interesting. This was a swampy area that attracted early settlers, and that's exactly what Bungay references in Wikipedia. So Ballew's History of Milford gives us a little more information on the factory. It says here, 2 small manufactories of cotton and woolen goods had been started in town. One in Bungay, so-called by Ebenezer Hunt, as early perhaps as 1827, and the other not long after in the center by Stephen R. and Parmenius P. Parkhurst. These had a run of several years in both places, but were doomed to extinction. Losses, fires, etc. desolated them. So we can see here that around 1827, the woolen factory was built, and it ran until about 1842 when it burned down. So let's take a look at what the woolen factory looks like today, or the area where it once stood, because it's definitely gone now. We're going to drop in here. We're trying to get around the intersection of Reservoir Road and Crockett Road where the town line is. So we take a look at where the factory was. This is it right here. This is where the Mill River crosses Crockett Road, Reservoir Road. And this area here is where the E.B. Hunt Woolen Mill once stood. And from the book Upton, Massachusetts, 1735 to 1935, on page 33, we find some information about the mill. Before the town was incorporated, many homes spun and wove cloth. Mothers, daughters, and children engaged in these home arts, which were necessities at that time. So when Ebenezer Hunt set up his 2 sets of machinery and a dye house at the foot of the pond, he was changing the habits of many homes, but giving steady employment to a considerable corps of workers, and bringing cash into circulation and benefiting the town. The yearly output was 31,200 yards of cloth, valued at $15,600 in 1837. The burning of the mill in 1843 ended the weaving industry in town. So it ran from 1827 to 1843, it looks like, the E.B. Hunt Mills, and it burnt down in 1843. So that's the story of the woolen factory on North Pond, Lake Maspenock. Let's take a look a little bit further down the Mill River now, and we're going to take a look at Upton. We're going to drop in that Upton 1798 map again that we looked at a little bit earlier, and we're going to see land here owned by Robert and Solomon Taft. Robert was the original Taft settler, one of the very first settlers of Mendon Upton area, and his family settled all the area around here. And this area now is Milford Conservation Land. So you can hike this portion of Camp Street Extension, and when you get to the Mill River, it becomes Taft Street in Upton. And mainly this section from about here up to here is still just an old dirt cart road that was there from 1680s or 1700s or whenever they first laid these out. Nothing has really been done to that road. It's a great place if you're a historian to go look. There's some foundations and stuff that you can research here. This homestead is no longer there, but all the stone walls marking out these properties are still there, and you can see the old grain fields and crop fields that they had. And the Taft family would have produced a lot of grain, and we're probably wondering, well, where did they mill it? Well, I found a map that was in the Milford Historical Society, and that map, I'm going to get rid of this map from Milford here, and let's take a look a little closer at this. What we see here is a grain mill and a mill pond. And this area here is on the top side of the Mill River, which is the Upton side, which this belonged to the Taft family. So this, I am going to venture a guess, was the Taft family's grain mill. I don't know if other families also utilized it or what, but if we drop this map off here and take a look at the area, you can definitely see the mill pond area here, and it's right in this vicinity here where the Taft grain mill sat. And they would have utilized this, but it seems if the E.B. Hunt woolen mill had dammed and had a mill pond here, slowing the rate of water down, would the Tafts have been able to actually operate it? They would have dammed it off here because there was a pond that sat. But one thing that I did notice that was kind of interesting from that map of 1798 is Robert and Solomon Taft retained a piece of property up here behind Peppercorn Hill, very oddly shaped, with this jutting out here. Not really sure. It really doesn't make a lot of sense. But if you drop off that map and take a look at the geography here, this sure seems like at one time it held water. I call it the giant's footprint, because that's what it looks like to me. but it looks like this ran down exactly to where the Taft grain mill was. So if we take a look, first we have the Mill River down here. So we've got the woolen mill, and that's slowing things down. But if we look at where that mill stream runs from the Giant's footprint down, that also runs right into where the Taft grain mill was. So I'm not sure if this provided an extra head of water for that, or what other reason there would be for the Taft family to retain this little piece of property, maybe where this little thing juts out at was where the dam sat or something. I'm not sure, but it's very interesting that they happen to keep that piece of property and this small, what looks like was a small pond of some sort, sat. We've got the Taft grain mill here, and the Taft family, original settlers of the South Lake Maspenock North Pond area. And then we've got the E.B. Hunt woolen mill, which stood also in this area. So these are the main areas where folks would have gone to work, to get cloth goods, to get wood sawn, to build structures with. So this was an important section of town, basically the industrial area of the early 1700s of this area. And the main residence back then was this little village down here of North Purchase, which had its own meeting house, church, bowling alley, and everything else back then. And we're going to do a whole episode on that. It's a really interesting area. Some of the first settlers of Milford settled here, and very interesting. That's going to be another episode, though. So down in this vicinity here, there's one more thing of interest that I wanted to point out before I close out this episode. And that's going to be this Aaron Partridge property shown here on this 1827 map of Milford. This Aaron Partridge was actually the second owner of this property, and we can see that from also Aidan Ballew's History of Milford. It says here, Aaron Partridge was born in 1774 and purchased the old Cody place in Milford on Camp Street near Bungay in 1799. And from the same book, we find this passage. Joseph Cody was from Hopkinton, the son of Isaac and Hannah Cody, born May 2nd, 1736. He settled in the vicinity of Bungay around 1760 on what has been in our time called the Partridge Place. This family remained in town some little time after its incorporation. I think he was its first constable and was styled Lieutenant Joseph Cody. He was a carpenter, and tradition says that he seldom used any measuring implement, but laid out his framing work so accurate by eye that all his joints and mortises fitted exactly when his frames were raised. He probably moved from town, perhaps to Hopkinton, not long after its incorporation. I cannot trace him further. So from all this, we can deduce that Camp Street was a cart road that was widened and improved about 1756. And 4 years later, Joseph Cody settled on the land. 40 years later, in 1799, the land was purchased by Aaron Partridge. This area is now under the high-tension wires and remained farmland, passing hands several times through the generations, eventually belonging to a lady named Mary Ferguson. Pine Island Road is recorded as passing through Ferguson land in 1901. The old cellar holes of the farm buildings can still be seen under the wires, but the old swamp they used to call Bungay has swallowed it up in a tangled mess. That's it for this episode. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe, and thanks for visiting.